Michael Bryant is a journalist, writer, and researcher who has worked with various anti-war groups, environmental organizations, and anti-globalization organizations on many issues ranging from U.S. imperialism, domestic corporate crimes, and the globalization of agriculture. He was involved with the Times Beach Action Group around issues pertaining to dioxin contamination in the St. Louis area and was one of the founding members of New England Resistance against genetic engineering. Michael currently works for Health Freedom Defense Fund, and he has published articles at globalresearch.ca, Off Guardian, Health Freedom Defense Fund, of course, Brownstone, Lou Rockwell, and other online sites. And Michael was one of the best researchers. I got to give him credit on this. Best researchers on topics related to COVID, which is why we featured him on, I think, 3 sessions during the end of COVID. Yeah, it was 3 sessions during the end of COVID. And his attention to detail and his ability to research, how do I put this? Like getting to the very minute but extremely important details on a topic is really incredible. And his ability to sort of show how these various events sort of tied together to create a bigger framework for all of the things that are at play in the world. And that's kind of what he does with this episode. He gives us some historical context, of course, geopolitical and economic context, which inevitably ties in with what's occurring between Israel and Palestine. And it relates, of course, as you would have probably guessed, to oil and gas. And of course, it relates to what happened with COVID. And we sort of tie all those together. And another topic I wish we would have covered during the end of COVID is what happened in Israel, because that also relates directly to what we'll talk about during this episode. But Michael is a fantastic researcher. This conversation was amazing. And given that I'm now no longer recording podcasts live, the conversations turn out to be a lot more authentic. Not that they were bad before, but I think they turn out a little bit better. So this is a very casual conversation between Michael and I, going pretty deep into these topics and how they have the potential to impact the world, and also what we can do about it. And of course, we always like to tie it back into solutions, so we cover that at the end. And this was an incredible conversation. So I hope you enjoy it. I know I did. And thanks again for tuning in. Listen to the language of the last 3.5 years. Lockdowns, travel restrictions, stay-at-home orders. This rhetoric, written by government agencies and corporate media, speaks to a clear intention, a concerted effort to keep us in place. Fortunately for us, a real grassroots movement, powered by real men and women, can never be stopped. Because mankind will always find the way forward. And this is where it all starts. With the Way Forward's new membership platform, you can connect with like-minded community and like-minded businesses near you by simply typing in your zip or postal code and setting a radius. We also have a marketplace featuring the best holistic health brands and products with deals you won't find anywhere else. And the best part is, you pay whatever you want to be a part of it. The Way Forward starts with a growing community coming together to share ideas, form local groups, and conduct business with like-minded men and women. Because if we're constantly being told what to do by so-called authorities, it's easy to feel helpless. But it's essential to know that we're not. Each of us has the power, and that power amplifies when we come together. There are many more health-conscious and sovereign-minded men and women than we realize, and this is where we all meet. Visit thewayforward.com to join virtually, connect locally, and pay whatever you want to be a part of it. This is the Way Forward. October 7th, I'll say this. I knew, as I was obviously watching from afar the sort of video footage and the coverage that was coming out of Israel I knew that this event was going to be very, very, very significant in terms of how it would play out in the world. And that's kind of what we're seeing happening. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on October 7th in general. I know you have a different starting point, which is fine.
So what I'd like to do is first plug a book, and it's not mine, okay? And it's an older book. This book is called Thy Will Be Done. It's about the conquest of the Amazon, Nelson Rockefeller, and evangelism in the age of oil.
Wow.
Okay.
In the age of oil.
In the age of oil.
That is pertinent to this, I think.
And so this book was written by Gerard Colby and Charlotte Dennett. Charlotte Dennett, I believe, was a Pulitzer Prize winning journalism. It took them around 10 years to write this book. They both had death threats against themselves. Wow. They were given access to the Rockefellers' private library. I would say, unbeknownst to the Rockefellers, what they were actually going to end up producing. Wow. It's a massive tome. It's 800 some pages with another 150 pages of footnotes. It's very dense reading. And the reason I start with this is what this book did for me, and I think will do for anyone who would take the time to read it, is you really get a look at geopolitical events from the top of the pyramid down.
Yep.
And you also get a really clear picture on how all of these different forces have these confluences. And we may only see this one event towards the end, but there are connections between these massive business interests with religious ideology and the Secret Service, the CIA, in these instances. And they do just this amazing detailed chronicling of how this all functions. And so as we look at the events of October 7th, okay, then in understanding, and we look at the events in Israel-Palestine over the many, many decades and the different geopolitical constructs of the Middle East, the religious positionings and the religious stories of the various sects in the Middle East, you really get a sense for what drives this ultimately are these large business and financial interests. Now, I've started off on a little bit of a tangent, and I'd like to add yet another one very quickly, which is Operation Gladio. This is an operation of stay-behind forces and after World War II. And
in what region?
They were all over Europe. The one that is focused on mostly is in Italy.
Okay.
And but they were all throughout Europe. And these were Allied forces, just to be clear. These were right-wing, fascistic, usually paramilitary or intelligence services or connected to intelligence services personnel that were purposefully destabilizing the region. Wow. Okay. And they were doing so in a way that they would be demonizing what were left-wing forces at that time, as there was competition for who would be gaining power in this vacuum post World War II. So they would do things like blow up train stations, car bombing. So civilians were getting killed, and these were being placed. The blame was being placed on anarchists, leftists, communists, and so on and so forth. And the reason I bring that up is to just point out the fact that and these entities were put in place by governments. Mm. Okay, so I just bring that up to illustrate quite clearly that these governments will kill their own civilians in order to achieve their political aims, in order to advance their geopolitical agendas.
What was a one incident in Cuba that the U.S. government never carried forth, but they had planned it in private, and it would have involved bombing certain U.S. cities, I believe, or doing something in certain U.S. cities, and then blaming it on Cuba. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
That was Operation Northwoods.
Operation Northwoods, that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, that one was never carried out. But that's another excellent departure for individuals to examine. In large part now, they're useful to examine because there's no refutation of it. These are all declassified documents now. You can go to the National Security Archive, and it's indisputable that either A, they, as in the case of Operation Gladio, they did it, or B, in the case of Operations Northwoods, there were operational plans to do so. And for whatever reasons, Operation Northwoods, they didn't carry out. So,
well, and real quick, that sort of makes you wonder how often these are planned and carried out, but then just simply not declassified on the back end.
Yeah, my view of it is they have these things in the boiler room all the time.
Yeah.
And then when they need it, they pull it out. Yeah. And then, yes, are there what are the levels to these things? Yeah. Operation Gladio, that's a huge operation. Yeah. Are there much smaller levels to these where they're constantly agitating and creating strategies of tension? I think we'd have to be naive to think that that's not happening on a regular basis. Yeah. Yeah. So, and then I'd like to bring up the Hannibal Doctrine, which is, that was an Israeli, I would say, technically unofficial. Some would say it was actually official for a short time, and now it's defunct. But this doctrine is essentially, if there is a conflict with the Palestinians that may entail hostages being taken, even if it means killing Israeli civilians or military personnel to take out those who may be taking these military personnel or Israeli citizens hostage, we will take out all of them, because it would be a public embarrassment to our government to be involved in a prisoner exchange, a hostage exchange.
And this was a doctrine put out by the Israeli government at some point. But people question the legitimacy is kind of what you're indicating?
I would say that the legitimacy of it is not questioned in so much as whether is this an official or was this an unofficial?
Got it. Okay.
Program.
That's very relevant, though. This is very relevant context, obviously.
So we know that was there. So now, fast forward here to the events of October 7th, and putting aside just the historical realities of what's been occurring in this area in the last 8-10 decades, which has been covered quite well by others. Even leading into that, just a week before, there were events, some agitation, some attacks on Palestinian citizens. So did that trigger, the Hamas forces to then say we are going to retaliate, we are going to fight back or whatnot? I don't know the answer to that myself. But what I will say is, once we got to October 7th, and this event occurred as we were being told initially, and one of the initial components of that narrative was that babies had been beheaded. I was pretty certain. I was certain that that story was false, and as it turns out, most all facets of the official story we were told about what happened on October 7th are proving to be false. But not only did my mind flash immediately to the babies are being thrown from incubators in Kuwait story, but it also spoke to me of, okay, if they're running with this narrative, A, there's a public relations firm behind it that has crafted this. B, we are in for a much larger operation than what we think.
It was the beheaded baby story specifically that sort of tipped you off to that.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, because it does bring up the Gulf War, right? Just like you said, the incubator baby thing, and then of course it for me brought memory to the Gulf of Tonkin incident, and then this is my own perspective, and I haven't talked to you about this, but I don't know your take on it, but also 9/11, a lot of the incidents surrounding September 11th. So there's been multiple sort of best way to put it is just questionable things that were pushed forth that brought a lot of emotional charge with them to sort of drum up or conjure up emotional support from people to justify the actions thereafter.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And it was a pretty, well, I will say clean cut narrative initially. It was 40 babies who were beheaded, sliced off, and had their heads sliced off, and there was no background or context given to well, how did we know this? Where did these babies come from? Whose children were these? And so forth. So it was fairly apparent that this was a story that was crafted, and biblically, 240 is a number which recurs.
Wow.
So the whole narrative right from the start spoke to me of a false flag operation.
Yeah.
And I'd say we're fairly well into this to where we can establish that that's indeed what happened, and it's then the details are coming out more so, that the numbers aren't as great as they stated. It wasn't 1,400. They're down to, I guess, 1,200 now. We may see that. We'll see what happens there. And that a significant portion of those were 900 were some sort of IOF security forces, military personnel. Significant number were involved in crossfire, and some number were killed by Israeli military forces. The remains of some of the houses and the vehicles indicate that they were blown up by heavier artillery than what the Hamas forces possess. So yeah, and then it's
Well, then also the Apache helicopter footage, right?
Yes,
that has come out.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting to me. I am grateful that I've never been involved in combat, and I never had to go through anything to get any sort of like top secret clearance or anything like that while I was in the military. But from what I do understand, it's interesting to me, and of course I'm applying what I think I know about the US military to how the Israeli government operates, because I sort of at this juncture view them as one and the same, really. But setting that aside, I wonder how that footage was already released this quickly, and the intention of it, because what that footage clearly shows, or appears to show, in conjunction with the testimony from some of the Apache helicopter pilots, is that they were firing on civilians. Now, you could talk about how whether it was unwittingly or unintentional, and that the civilians just happen to be there. And we're talking about Israeli civilians, right? But nonetheless, it appears to be almost irrefutable at this point that many of the people that were killed, at the very least, at the music festival, were due to fire from the Israeli Defense Forces. Do you have any comments on that?
I would say that, this comes back to the lead-in where a certain number and a certain segment of civilians are deemed expendable.
Yeah.
By the government. I would also say that the way footage can be produced in today's media landscape, one has to be super skeptical.
Yes.
Of anything that you see. I don't really, from all sides, anything
100%
that you see right then and there, after you're done corroborating it, okay, do it again, do it again, do it again, multiple sources, and then wait a few days before you even talk about it, because
you could jump the gun and share something and look pretty silly.
Yeah, that level of a manipulation is happening at hyper speed, and it's happening in volumes that are, there are very large groups that are hired to do this. I just heard on a report this morning, evidently, that I forget who it was. It was one of the main. It might even been Netanyahu. It was one of the major Israeli political officials. It was, they're talking about this charred baby.
Yeah,
they were holding it at one of these political officials. As it turns out, that it was in a blanket. It was actually a dog.
It was an AI generated photo.
Yeah, so they people who have
this is fifth generation warfare, though. That's what we're in.
Yeah.
Is the sophistication of artificial intelligence to create a very, very real, like it appears real. If you're not there on the ground, you would not know otherwise that it is totally fake. Photos and videos.
Yeah, it's I would say the level of this is something that I certainly wasn't aware of, and I'm pretty seasoned.
Yeah.
But the level of this is something I wasn't aware of 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And maybe the level is not the right word, but just the capabilities, the
sophistication.
The sophistication of it is pretty.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing.
So with that though, along that same thread, and we'll just go off on a brief tangent because then I want to come back to October 7th and building forward. Because I know you have, I would say, a very clear. I always think you're very clear in what's going on because you look at things at such a deep way, analyzing the statistics related to situations and sort of the overall landscape, and you're really good about that. So I think where you see this conflict playing out towards the ultimate aims, I want to get to that. But setting that aside for a minute, on the thread of questioning footage and photos coming from both sides of this, the one thing that I will say is that a lot of, not all of, but a lot of the footage that we see coming out of Palestine that is corroborated from multiple vantage points on a daily basis sort of lends credence to this idea that there are thousands and thousands of Palestinians, overwhelming majority of which, if not all of which, are innocent men, women, and children being slaughtered on a day-to-day basis. And then we can also look at statements from Israeli officials to lend credence to that idea, given that they have outright said our focus, I forget the guy, but our focus is not on accuracy, but on total destruction of Gaza. And then, of course, there's several statements coming from Israeli officials, top Israeli, both military and governmental officials, giving credibility to this idea that there are actually thousands and thousands. I mean, at this point, tens of thousands of Palestinians that are being slaughtered.
Yes, I agree 100%. And I for myself, being here at this point in my research and my knowledge base, I look at who are the individuals presenting this, and what is their track record.
Yeah.
These individuals who just popped up, you really need to find out who's behind them.
Yeah.
However, you have certain individuals that have been around a long, long time, and they have a track record. Someone like Ali Abu Nima, who is from Electronic Intifada. Okay, Ava Bartlett, Dan Cohen.
Dan Cohen's great.
Max Blumenthal. He's no nonsense, and Norman Finkelstein.
Yeah, Norman's
these individuals, great. And you say, what is their track record? And these individuals have been pretty darn accurate every step of the way for the last sometimes 3 decades. And so understanding those sources as reliable for that time frame, you can pretty much understand.
Rich Medhurst too. That's another one.
Yeah.
Rich Medhurst has a really good track record, I'd say, on this.
And then, how are they placing all of this into historical patterns? Not just isolating this as this event.
There's a broader context. There's a broader context here.
Yeah. That is a way for me to, sort the wheat from the chaff and get a pretty clear picture of the accuracy of what's happening,
So revisiting the events on October 7th, I just want to get your thoughts on this, because I've seen conflicting ideas, even coming from some of the people that you've mentioned on the events of October 7th. There's a split in terms of either, on one side, Israel was aware of this or turned a blind eye to it on October 7th, or the other flip side is Hamas genuinely caught the Israeli government off guard and the Israeli forces off guard, despite Israel claiming to have, I'd say it's established, not in terms, I can't establish whether the technology is as good as it is, but they claim to have, and many people accept that they have, the world's preeminent, most sophisticated border defense technology systems, the world's most sophisticated intelligence agency in Mossad. And I know that Mossad is only one arm of their intelligence, because they also have their military intelligence, which is, I forget the name of it. You might know, but which side of those two do you personally think this fits into?
I personally think that Israel facilitated it.
That's where I fall too.
Israel agitated towards it and allowed it to happen. And there are two pieces of this that there are many things that and some of them you just mentioned that push me in that direction. One is that it happened for 7 hours.
Yeah.
Before we had some sort of a response, and so that to me seems like the promoter is not breaking up the fight because he wants to see a little more bloodshed, so that
absolutely.
And then I would say that leading into this, in Palestine itself, does Israel have elements that are working towards agitation in various ways, trying to destabilize Hamas, trying to empower, a compliant regime in the area? I would have to say that's a near certainty.
Again, statements from Benjamin Netanyahu lend credence to that.
So were all of those individuals that were involved in that Hamas activity, who are being called Hamas, actually part of Hamas? I don't think they were. I think there were also some elements in there that were not to say that Hamas wouldn't do pretty much what they did anyway, but were and maybe even trusted elements who are working for the Israeli government. and have been put into Hamas, push things in this way, alerted people to, hey, here are these openings. I don't know how this happened, but we have an opportunity to, and so forth. And that's for speculation based on history.
Yeah. Well, I mean, from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong on this, from my understanding, in large part, Hamas was partially created by Israel and the US as a means to oppose Yasser Arafat in the 1980s. And then thereafter, there's been a continual support and in some rides, in some ways, an outward, like an overt support of Hamas by the Israeli government to continue to platform Hamas, if you will, to ensure the destabilization of Gaza so that a true Palestinian state cannot be formed.
Here's how I see that. I think we can't know, how these internal workings occur. If you're a political entity and you're quite savvy, you may use another more powerful political entity to obtain your power. Okay. Once you obtain your power, then you may not do what this more powerful political entity had signed you up for. Okay. And then at that point, you become the next devil, the next demon. Yeah. And you're going to be either forced into compliance, or you're going to be, we are going to agitate to unseat you. Having said that, my view might be a little bit different than that Hamas is. I don't believe Hamas is a puppet regime of Israel.
No, I just meant at the very beginning, the establishment of Hamas was originally intended to be that.
Right. I don't have the answer to that. I don't know, but my view of it is that Hamas is the current iteration of what Hamas is an outgrowth of the violent oppression, the colonization, the constant humiliation that the people have suffered, and I believe also a outcropping of the fact that the Palestinian Authority is a watered down entity. The Palestinian Authority has not served the Palestinian people. It has become a political organ that is jockeying for position for its own political aims.
Well, if anything, that is the organization that is now upheld by the Israeli government or supported by the Israeli government.
Yeah. So that's my view of it. I would say there's some others that have much deeper knowledge of those internal workings than I. So I'm going on, what I have seen, in the recent years.
Yeah. And so you bring up the Hannibal doctrine, right? And what comes up for me, and I almost wish maybe for the end of COVID, because you had done a session on New York City and a session on Italy, but another relevant one would have been a session devoted to Israel and the measures imposed by the Israeli government. And the reason that I bring that up is because first, we've already established that there are countless examples throughout history where governments will commit atrocious, wicked acts against their own people, right, or people that are supposedly under their jurisdiction, as a means to justify whatever ends they're wanting to do, right? They will do that, and then we talk about the Hannibal doctrine. But this idea that the Israeli government is, quote, fighting for self-defense, setting that aside based on the actions that they're committing in Palestine right now, and the fact that there are hostages in Palestine right now, and they seem to be overwhelmingly just indiscriminately bombing Gaza, right? Setting all that aside, let's revisit COVID, because from my understanding, the Israeli government was by far amongst I wouldn't consider them a Western nation necessarily, but definitely more westernized nations, was by far one of the most tyrannical towards their own people.
Yeah, it's true. Wouldn't that would have been an interesting segment
Yeah.
at the time? And I think what we would have probably the response from the audience that you were reaching, that we were all reaching, would have been overwhelmingly negative towards the Israeli government, and rightly so. Israel was forcibly having its citizens be, maybe you could almost say, the model state for these experimental injections. Yeah. And Borla and Pfizer in particular were, I would say, financially in bed with the Israeli governments to a degree that was just brazen. It was just out in the open. And so it's been, I guess the word is fascinating. There's probably a better word for it, to watch how individuals that we've been, hearing from, regularly in contact with, or all immersed in, just speak out vehemently against this COVID project in Israel and the state of Israel. How can they do this to their citizens? This is pure evil. I agree, even this degree of terminology, and then the switch just gets flipped, and all of a sudden, the Israeli government is protecting its people.
Yeah,
it's
mind blowing. It's mind blowing to witness.
And I think what's missing in that analysis for people who do that is that one of the things that's missing is that they're not looking at that larger geopolitical picture. They're not looking at that the dire financial and economic and situation that these governments are in, which is catalyzing these other global events. The situation with COVID, the situation in Ukraine, the situation now in Palestine. None of these sit here just isolated on islands. They're all interconnected with this system that is at a point of existential crisis. And so, yeah, it's just, that part's just been breathtaking to watch, and witness how people are just compartmentalizing these items, and not understanding that what these same entities are trying to oppress all of us. None of these entities care about the Israeli citizens. Even they don't care about the Jewish people.
No.
They don't care. So hopefully people will begin more and more to see through that. And on the other side of that, we're seeing globally these amazing protests in a very short amount of time in support of the Palestinian people, and aghast at the atrocities that the Israeli government is committing. And quite a lot of those people probably were supportive of the COVID measures,
which is crazy, because do they not see how contradictory they are in their sentiments too? It's nuts.
So once you kind of take a bird's eye view of it, and you see, wait, I see how it's these same gigantic, colossal financial, economic, political entities that are pulling the strings on all of these items, all of these, supposed events. I wouldn't call them all isolated events. They're part of the same
part
process.
Of a larger scheme.
Yeah. So we'll just we'll get there. We'll get there where folks are really seeing it.
We all know that big ag is poisoning our food supply, and big pharma's so-called medicine is straight up poison. What most people aren't aware of, though, is that most supplements are also filled with artificial sweeteners, dyes, GMOs, glyphosate, and a host of other toxic ingredients, even many of the more natural supplements. My good buddy James Benefico dedicated his life to crafting the world's cleanest, most nutritious organic supplements after a pre-workout energy drink caused heart palpitations so severe that he almost landed up in the ER. Organic Muscle was born, revolutionizing sports nutrition by using exclusively non-GMO ingredients from USDA organic farms. Since then, tens of thousands of people, including myself, have leveled up their fitness and their health with Organic Muscle's award-winning natural pre-workout. There's no jitters, no heart palpitations, no itchy skin, just nourishing organic food and herb-based ingredients for clean, sustained energy, strength, endurance, and recovery. Numerous studies have shown that Tonka Ali is the most effective herb in the world for naturally boosting testosterone levels. And we know that testosterone levels are depleting all over the world because of what's put in the food supply, what we're exposed to. Organic Muscle has the world's first fully organic Tonka Ali supplement. I only support and promote things that I actually use, and I can say I legitimately use Organic Muscle products. Use code FORWARD15 at checkout for 15% off at organicmuscle.com. This is the part that I want to get to. So we've already kind of established the contextual pieces here. And where is this heading? What is the intention in your mind of this conflict itself? Or I don't even want to call it a conflict. It's not a conflict of what is going on, and now the genocide of people in Gaza.
For this specific region, it's they want the people out of there. They want to ethnically cleanse these people who are in their way of these very, very large plans of these big oil companies, big financial conglomerates, big you name it. Okay, there's a 10-page document that came out. It came out, I think, late October 2023. Even that's while this is all going on, and it was essentially saying we have three options for this. One is to allow the population to remain in Gaza and get the Palestinian Authority to rule. Okay, which goes back to what you had said about this they now feel is going to be a compliant regime, so we can get them back in power. Or B, the population stays in Gaza with what they call a local Arab authority. What that looks like, we can just guess. Local Arab authority, that sounds like a old colonial term, Or C, option C was the evacuation of the civilian population from Gaza to Sinai. And so as these three proposals are put out there, they also note that A and B are really not our top choices. We really are seeking choice C. We want the population to be displaced. We want them to be removed. So,
which is interesting that they present these three options as if these are the three only options. Like oh, these are the only options that are available on the table, which is like I won't say dilemma, false dilemma in and of itself of sorts.
Yeah, and also, like, who are you to be presenting anything?
Exactly.
These people live here. This is their land.
That's what I'm saying.
But sometimes what I try to do when I talk to people about it is I want to break it down on a level that is really to their life, which this is not an abstraction. So, hey, guess what? We live in this neighborhood. If they decide they want to build an airport through there, they're going to move you out of there. If they all of a sudden there's some massive mineral deposit discovered near this town, and they got to build the infrastructure to set that up, they're going to move you out of there first. They're going to offer you a little bit of money for your house, your land, or whatever. If you say, no, we live here, where are we supposed to go? Then, gradually they'll ratchet it up. Okay. And ultimately they will remove you in ways which are, by whatever means necessary.
Forceful.
So, yeah. So that's what they want to do right there. They want the um, uh, population out of there.
Yeah.
They're in their way of their mega projects.
And what are those mega projects that are on the horizon? Because I know that Netanyahu sometime, I think in 2019 or 2021, presented a map to the UN that didn't even have, like, not only did it not have Palestine labeled on there or Gaza labeled, it didn't even have it like sectioned off with a border. It was just Israel was now
Yeah,
occupying all of that land.
yeah.
So what are these mega projects?
Well, the first one to touch upon, I think more people are paying attention to this now, are the oil and gas projects, mainly the gas, the liquefied natural gas projects. And there are some significant discoveries in off the coast of Gaza, and there are also some significant struggles with who controls the rights to those discoveries.
Hmm.
And they call the two largest ones right now is Gaza Marine 1, Gaza Marine 2, and they're it's somewhere around 1.3 trillion cubic feet of natural gas that is recoverable, they say. And I forget I think it's also like 1.5 billion barrels of oil that's recoverable, somewhere along those lines. So that's a pretty big slice of energy, and they believe that there may be more, throughout the Levant Basin. And so, but in any case, they I want to be sure I include this, is that there are also huge issues surrounding water, and they need to really desalinize a lot of water to make this place habitable. And desalinization plants require an extraordinary amount of liquefied natural gas.
Which is relevant, just to contextual, just real quick tangent, just to contextualize the genocide that is being committed, because not only are tens of thousands of innocent Palestinian men and women and children being killed, I think estimates, and these are independent estimates, upwards of 97% of the water available in Gaza is not fit for human consumption. What I mean by that is it is poison. It is poisonous water that you absolutely cannot drink. So when Israeli officials are saying we are cutting off water to Gaza because they have a blockade on Gaza, they control everything that goes in and out of Gaza. Yes, they're not, quote, occupying Gaza anymore. I've heard people say, well, they left in 2006. Yes, that is technically true, but a blockade is almost worse. So with that being said, when you're cutting off water to 2.3 million people when they don't have water available, what happens?
Yeah, people die. And
That's it.
also they create extraordinary amounts of disease, because people will obtain some type of water substance, if we could call it that, and that water will have all sorts of problems, So yeah,
Yeah, I just want to share that point, because that is a relevant point to sort of contextualize the level of absolute wickedness that is really, like, ironically, you could call them, especially because Netanyahu has quoted the Torah to sort of kind of in a pseudo way, quote, justify what he's doing, which is just absurd. But what he's doing is it's inversion of words, and it's satanic. It can only be called satanic in my mind if we're going to go there. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think that the current Israeli regime with Netanyahu, the face of it is, they are how would you put, they're a psychotic bunch. They are
Yep.
perfect for the job, if you will.
Absolutely.
And so that is, at this point, the large multinational forces really need an aggressive group leading the way. They're not, their patience has run out. Okay, they're ready to move with these contracts. and to establish these, I think one of the easiest ways to think about this, these are run like mafia operations. And we have these contracts now that have come due. We've got people that have signed on the dotted line. We've got memorandum of understanding. These companies have said that our ability to move forward with these contracts is dependent on security. And by security, we need security. We need physical security, so we can go out there and we can drill, so we can explore. And we also want security in these contracts, that we're the ones that are going to control the contracts. We're going to control the direction of this flow. We're going to control the finances of it. And if we can't get that, then we will not proceed with our projects. And so when you've got contracts that are in the billions of dollars that are dependent on this region being quote unquote secure, they'll go to great lengths to clear out whatever problems are in their way. And that's where we're at right now. That's what we're seeing right now.
Yeah. And the ultimate goal, correct me if I'm wrong, is to create a modern version of the Silk Road in an economic corridor. I've heard a few different people who seem to be in the know and hip to what's going on. That's what they're trying to create. And then we'll touch on this afterwards, but this relates directly to, ironically, to Ukraine, Russia, and the Nord Stream 1 and 2 being blown up.
Yeah. So to go with just the exploration and securitization of these large amounts of these large gas fields that are sitting off the coast of Gaza, there's a project called the Gurion Canal, which has been, it's been planned for and Ben Gurion was considered the founder of Israel, and he was the first prime minister, and it was first proposed in 1963, I believe it was. And, they just had this crazy proposal. It's from the U.S. Department of Energy. And I forget how many, I want to say it was 500 some. They were going to put 500 some, mini nukes under the ground and use that method to, blast this canal through the Negev desert. And what this is meant to do is replace the Suez Canal as the major maritime trade route between Europe and Asia. So that project was, kiboshed, and it was seen for the madness that it was. However, the idea never went away, and so that idea is now they're bringing that back to life, and so they want to take an alternate route and have this be a replacement for the Suez Canal. They want to make it deeper, wider. They're going to have this be 2 lanes. So they're going to, essentially try to make it more appealing, okay, for those who are transporting their goods. And I believe it was 12 or 13% of world commerce. The entire world goes through the Suez Canal each day. Okay, so that's an enormous,
big deal.
Enormous amount of trade.
And geographically, this new canal, just to paint the picture for those who are geographically deficient, where would this new one be located?
So that goes from the Mediterranean, it goes through the Negev desert, and then through the Gulf of Aqaba out to the Red Sea. Got it. Okay. That's the proposal. And I want to say it was around 300 kilometers. Wow. Yeah. So it's crazy. And it ends up the optimal route, it ends up in the north of Gaza.
This transfer
parts ends up.
Okay, got it. And that's relevant, of course, which is why they're doing what they're doing in Gaza, to be able to trade it, to create this. And of course, the oil that is found off the coast of Gaza, of which Palestinian people aren't even allowed to fish in those waters, which is another relevant thing. But the paint the larger picture here of the implications economically for the sort of transition or transfer of economics from the Suez Canal to here, what that could possibly, and of course we can only speculate, but I think we can have a good idea. I think you would have a great idea of what this could look like in terms of the economic impact.
Well, I'll add to that there's also, as part of this project, they want to have a high-speed rail system that is parallel to the Ben Gurion Canal, and that has been at least promoted as it's going to be for tourism, and so that they have these grandiose idea. It's hard to even fathom it, as a lot of this is desert.
Yeah.
But and then Saudi Arabia wants to be involved in, or is involved in, this concept of turning this into a tourist Mecca, which is going to impact their economy as well. So, as far as the overall economic impact, I don't think it's possible to put a number on anything like this. But we're in the trillions of dollars when you consider it over a number of years. When you think about the contracts that are involved in building this project, the amount of natural gas and oil that's extracted from this project, where it gets virtually impossible to start pinning numbers on it is you can get pretty close on those numbers, or you can make some guess within $40 to $50 billion ranges. But what happens here is, once you control that liquefied natural gas and you can control the direction of it, you can then control the policies of governments. Okay. And in particular, you can control the policies of European governments who are really desperate for natural gas.
Yeah.
Okay. And so if you can control their policies with just this gas, this doesn't mean you just get revenue from that. Okay. This also means you can control their policies on trade. You can control their policies on agriculture. You can control their policies on just about everything, on banking. Okay. You can control how their policies have to fit with edicts from the IMF. Okay. And this also impacts, one of the largest impacts, which I don't hear it being spoken about too much, a little bit here and there, is also how this continues to buttress the petrodollar. Okay. Yeah. And
that's kind of what I was getting at too.
You continue to maintain that as the world's trade currency, and through that dollar hegemony, you can control how these governments are forced to interact with one another. Also, it's not just a direct trade any longer. I can control the way you interact with government X based on me controlling the currency with which you must interact with that government. Okay. So I hope I explained that clearly.
Absolutely. No, that was perfect.
I think grammatically I didn't do so well there, but anyway,
I think you did great. You always do great in that. How does this whole situation, this is a rhetorical question, I think people those listening and watching can already kind of put the pieces together. How does this relate directly to what happened with Nord Stream 1 and 2 in the situation in Ukraine and Russia?
Well,
I think those are kind of two questions in there, and maybe the latter is kind of still dicey, but the former, the question on Nord Stream 1 and 2.
Yeah. So if we go back and we look at articles, okay, but we're just going to go back a couple of years, this past winter, the winter before, and we're going to look at some articles in the European press. We see a lot of discussion about gas shortages, heat, particularly as relates to, heating your homes. We all need to get our thermostats down, and they weren't okay. It's a good idea to get your thermostat down, sure, but we're like, okay, well, you really got to, and that was being told to the European populace. They were being told that this was due to the situation between Ukraine and Russia, right? It's always these nice, pleasant words. It's a situation between Ukraine and Russia. It's not colossal theft of these resources, right? But in any case, so
and correct me if I'm wrong, just to lay the context. You share where are the Nord Stream pipelines, or where were they running, and who are they running from and to?
They're running to Germany.
Correct. From Russia.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. And that is relevant.
Yes. So if we can change that and have now Germany, for example, okay, but it's elsewhere. If we can have Germany divorcing itself from Russian, which, by the way, this is backfiring. We're looking at it's backfiring. But if we can get Germany to divorce itself from using Russian gas and now using our gas, shall we call it, right? Okay, because most Middle Eastern gas is U.S., UK, Dutch gas, by the way.
I tend to not say our because I have no relation to the U.S. government, but yeah. But in principle, I get what you mean. Yeah.
No, you have to dance, just dance around the language all the time.
For sure.
Right. So, but if the Western powers are controlling that gas, and that's really what it's all about. It's controlling it. It's not even having it so that we can, bring it all to the shores of the U.S. It's not benefiting the U.S. population.
Well, right? Of course, because there are supposedly, and I would say this is probably true, an abundance of natural gas available in the United States, and we see us constantly shopping elsewhere and not establishing pipelines in the United States. And that is, of course, all intentional, because it's all a means to destabilize and make it more difficult based on the total agenda that's at play here for the common men and women, and especially so the middle class.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's so what I'd say, if you can sabotage those pipelines, okay, let's just think of it from a mafioso businessman's perspective. If I can sabotage these pipelines over there, I can get these people off the land over here where I know there are mass quantities of this resource, okay, and then I can take this route, okay, that can transport these items over to where you are at, and you can no longer get it there, and your people need this, okay, for their well-being, for their warmth, for their well-being, what do you?
Not only just for that, let's think of how many logistics operations run on this stuff.
Yeah.
Everything.
Everything. Yeah. Agriculture. Foodstuffs. Absolutely. So it's, we're always told that these are so complex. We can't understand this. This just goes back centuries, thousands of years, maybe since the beginning of time. It's not complex at all. And you know what? You look at these things. One thing that again flashed in my mind right away as this was happening. I was fairly involved in anti-Iraq peace protests or whatnot, and the various iterations of it from Bush, Clinton, Bush, and the one of the famous images is of Donald Rumsfeld shaking Saddam Hussein's hand. And I would say I was in the 1980s. I don't remember the exact, but that moment was at a time where they made an agreement that Bechtel would have the contracts, okay, for Iranian energy, and they had made that agreement. Well, Saddam Hussein broke that contract and said no, without getting into that history too much. Essentially, what that happened, then Saddam became a villain.
Yeah.
Okay. Up to that point, he was a fine, upstanding man. Okay, in the eyes of the West. So, when we flash forward to today, I see the same thing. Similar thing playing out. We have this entity that is not playing ball with us. Okay. And in fact, there was this was a Reuters report. We don't always have to dig too deep to understand what these characters or how these characters see it. And this was just a recent Reuters report, and this had to do with oil and gas contract. And the Israelis were touting the Palestinian authorities as being the ones who are going to be involved in these negotiations. And the Palestinian Authority says, we are waiting to know what exactly the Israelis have agreed to in details. We can't make a position based on a statement to the media. So they're saying, well, we want to know a few more details and so forth. But that sends a signal that we're interested in negotiating. The Hamas official said, we reaffirm that our people in Gaza have the rights to their natural resources.
Wow.
So these are two very different signals.
Mm.
And so if you're the colonialist, you're the imperialist, one has told you, we are going to work with you, but we certainly want a piece of the pie. The other one is saying, as was really beginning to happen throughout the Pan-Arab world, in the late 90s and the 2000s, that's not for you to say. These are our resources.
Yeah, these are our people. These are the people who are indigenous to this land. This is their choice. Well, and you see the effect of the dehumanization of people in Gaza and how pervasive it is in various facets of the mindset as by which we approach this whole situation, right? Of course, valuing one Israeli life 20-fold that, if not more, of one Palestinian life. But then even when we discuss what is to become of the stuff that is there, we don't even consider the people who are there as having any sort of say, any sort of no mention of what they think, no consideration of what they think. And then even the sentiments of, oh, well, why don't they all just go to Egypt? They just all need to go to Egypt. And then it's like, well, how come Egypt won't take them on? And it's funny because oftentimes these sentiments are shared by the exact same people who are like, if a situation happened, let's say between Guatemala and Mexico, there was a similar situation. These same people who are saying, well, Egypt should let them in. Egypt should let them in after having to flee their own land in which they've lived in and they've been in refugees in for the last 75 plus years and have lived on for generations. Those same people, if this roles were reversed and something happened between Guatemala and Mexico, would say, absolutely not. It's not our job to take them in. But then now they're saying, why doesn't Egypt take them in? Why isn't Egypt taking these 2 million people? But that was kind of a tangent. But the general point is, when it comes to this situation, not even no consideration of what the people in Gaza want for the land that they are indigenous to. And that's after having been, without even considering the context of the last 75 plus years, and without considering the fact that they are freaking having genocide being committed against them right now.
Yeah, I think that comes to, you're accepting the premise of this false premise of the entire argument being made. Not what you said, but you're
Totally.
you're once you make these unwarranted assumptions, then you can get lost in this labyrinth of other discussions and arguments around it, which aren't really getting to the fundamental aspects of what is happening, the fundamental principles of geopolitical events, what just fundamental ideas of what should or shouldn't be allowed, and then just also some fundamental ideas of human decency. So someone can walk into your house and say, hey, we are going to be living here now. We're going to be taking your house. And there are some very heavily armed, and they're like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, no, we've gotten the neighbor down the road to accept you, they're going to take you in. So, like, well, no, this is my house. Well, why don't you just go down the road and stay with these people? They said they'd take you in. So all of a sudden, you're the unreasonable party here, right? So, and, you know,
it's crazy.
It's on just a fundamental level. So many facets of these discussions take off in a way which puts the sort of original sins out of the picture, and then you just start clouding it further and further and further and further. Yep. And then it's hard for people to get back to the original story and yep. see it. And I think just on Egypt too, why would Egypt not take them in, and we might say, well, what's wrong with the Egyptian government? This isn't a noble entity either. No, exactly. Egypt understands that it has huge business interests through the Suez Canal. And, if you and I know about this Ben Gurion Canal, and these people have known about this for a long time. They know what threats are coming their way. So no, they don't want to see this area get cleared out per se, and because that would endanger their own business interests. And so that, that's a little bit cynical from their perspective as well. At the same time, this kind of discussion should never even be happening. No. This is, I saw a map yesterday. It was kind of a cool looking map of Palestine in 1947. I think we've all seen that one, which has those 47, and then it progresses up to present day, and it's in green, and then the Palestinian green turns into this little slice. But this one was just showing some of the topography and geography, and as you looked at that map, it was pretty fascinating to see it and go, wait, where's Israel?
Yeah,
Israel's, oh, there it is. It's barely over here, right? Yep. And where is that next question? Where are those thoughts that going, wait, what happened to all of these Palestinians who used to live in this big landmass? Mm. What happened to their lives? What happened to their ancestors and so forth? So yeah, that's, I guess, just more.
Yeah. And another piece on that real quick is that there is a narrative that prior to 1940s, like maybe even prior to 1919, that area was mostly consisting of a nomadic people or people who were living in very poor conditions that weren't a part of a bustling civilization. And in fact, it is very, very clear how that is totally untrue. Mm-hmm. Like they had all of the, or mostly all of what would have been the modern niceties, if you will, that existed in many European civilizations that were existing in between 1919 and 1947 in Palestine. So this idea that they came in and just said, hey, these mostly nomadic desert dwelling people need to just kind of get out of here is not true. I mean, it was people who were sophisticated. Not that that matters either way, which is absurd that we even have to consider that. They're still human beings, irrespective of if they're more modernized or not. But the modernization would lend credence to the reality that they were established there. They were living in cities. They had theaters. They had schools. They had medical systems. They had train systems. They had all that stuff. And then with the UN establishment of Israel, that was violently forcing those people out of that region.
Yeah, that discussion gets us to this idea of manifest destiny, being
Yeah.
the enlightened people, we get into the heart of darkness, and that line of um, um, sort of malicious thinking has certainly been around for a long, long time.
Absolutely. Yes.
That's how we can justify moving Native Americans onto reservations and
Yep.
so forth, right? So um, uh, it's when you look at the history of it, these individuals had very sophisticated societies. Okay,
Yep.
and yeah, there was math going on there. There was
Yeah.
there was
Exactly.
right and um but yeah, what I guess I would just say to that is um this is another way, another means for people to demonize and for people to um create their own sort of personal stories and their own personal justifications
Yeah.
for accepting these brutalities, and it's a way to uh, disassociate from it in a way too.
Yep.
I think so.
How does so we know that the COVID operation was a step in a larger operation, right? How is how does this fit with COVID and the larger operation that's at play in your mind? Have you thought about that yet? Because we got
Yeah,
to know that this is tied in. There's no accidents here. This is all at some level putting these pieces together, and that's where I appreciate, despite the many things that I am that in many ways I am sort of look back at my time at West Point, my time in the Army with a little bit of disgust. But one thing I am very grateful for is that I majored in systems engineering, and I understand how seemingly isolated things have a deeper interconnectedness with other things than we could ever fathom. But all that to say, how does this play into the larger agenda?
if we look at who runs the show, okay, it's not BP, okay, it's not Pfizer, it's not the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It's not the pharmaceutical industry. We could say these are all sort of pass-through organizations. Okay, now these are very, very powerful organizations.
Yeah.
Okay, and have tremendous influence in the world. But who really sits at the top there are the financiers. Okay, and I'm not saying this is all about money either. Okay,
No.
no,
There's some deeper spiritual implications
yeah,
at play here, and everyone has their own ideas on what they are. But yes, I agree with you
right.
on that.
So, but what I will say is that, well, I'll take a bit of a diversion here. So I was involved in the anti-GMO movement as well, and um, so I was one of the original members. I wouldn't say anyone founded it or that it was a really cohesive organization of the New England Resistance Against Genetic Engineering. And so for me at the time, it was just, oh man, we have got to stop GMO corn. We have got to stop biotech. We have got this, da, 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 da. And someone pointed out to me that said, well, that's not really the problem. I said, these are things we want to get rid of. But if the venture capitalists, if the financiers decide that they're going to pull out of this industry and go over here, this industry is going to die, right? So we're looking at more of a social and a political problem. It's not so simple as just, okay, stop GMO corn or GMO soy. And so that broadened my understanding of how these things work. So if these large financial entities decide that we are going to completely pull out of the pharmaceuticals, okay, well, the pharmaceutical industry will collapse virtually overnight. Okay, we are going to take all of this and we are going to go into just exploring this new technology that can turn sand into gold, or it doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
And so who runs the show here are entities like BlackRock, Vanguard, Fidelity, Goldman Sachs, and all of these entities. Okay, and now there's this interwoven board of directors and all this sort of stuff. But that's
one's on the board of the other one, another one's on the board of the other one.
But they run the media, they run the they're doing all this sort of thing. So when we look at what is happening in the Western financial system, we are at the end of this particular iteration of it, I would suggest. Okay. And so they're in this is an existential crisis for this system. And so they made a determination that we can't keep kicking the can down the road as we've been doing for the last, easily 20 years. Some could argue, we could argue even longer. Okay. But we've got to install an entirely new system. Okay. And that new system is dependent on controlling certain segments of the, shall we say, the macroeconomic society. Energy is one of the biggest. Okay. The health management system, if you will, is currently the biggest. The tech surveillance sector is currently one of the biggest. So what they are, in my view, what they are attempting to do is they're trying to essentially wipe out the current monetary systems of these various Western governments. Okay, control these governments through the way they control the energy that they need, force them into these programs which will destabilize the country's currencies. Okay, get these countries then to be forced as and again, in the background here, the petrodollar is a massive tie to the banking industry. Get these countries forced onto this new system, okay, which is going to be digitized, and force these countries to adhere to the dictates of the IMF and World Bank policies, and get all of these nations on a central bank digital currency. And we have there is, I think my view here differs from some of the people that I really respect, and I wouldn't rule out any of their views. I believe that there are serious geopolitical schisms. I don't believe BRICS and the US are on the same side, okay, per se.
I think there's different, I've thought the same, that there's different factions of like I don't know what to call them, because I hate saying the word cabal, because I cannot say that word. But there's different there's different mafias, if you will.
That's exactly how I see it. Yes. Yeah.
That sometimes their interests are aligned and sometimes they're not.
That's how I see it too. Now, when sometimes if I'll bring it up or have that discussion, you're like seen as someone who's promoting the Russian government or the Chinese.
No, absolutely not. They're shitty as well.
So
it's not that Putin's a good guy. It's just that, like, within the grand scheme of things right now, it may seem like whatever is happening there is a little less worse than this, but it's still bad,
Yeah, these are business people that have these their business interests, and it is run, and again, like the mafia.
Yep.
And so, the petrodollar is the thing that maintains U.S. hegemony. Okay. Mm. And so to control the energy resources and the direction of these resources in this region, you control the currency. Mm. And if you can't do that, okay, then you can set your central bank digital currency up, but it's not going to have the power that you want it to have. And so I guess in my ambling sort of way, that's how I see these things connected. I consider COVID as an operation. And I see that as the circuit breaker, the kickstart for this larger operation. As others have pointed out, in the late summer of 2019, to my mind, that's when the G7 bankers said, this is it. We have to make this happen now. We can no longer continue to work within this system.
Wow.
And so that's how I see them all being interconnected. And that's why I think we're seeing, in one country after the next, we're seeing hyperinflation, and a devaluation of the currency.
What's so crazy is I've seen a lot of people that I respect, that I've followed on the economic factors that are at play, that have it's always hard to call the markets on when something will crash, right? When the economy is going to crash. But the amount that it's being pumped up artificially and it hasn't crashed yet is so scary, because that just means the inevitable crash is going to be far worse than it would have been as they continue to artificially hold it up.
I'm probably not the most I don't have a rosy perspective on that. How about that?
Yeah.
I believe it has already crashed.
Yeah.
Okay. And
that's what I'm saying. But like it's artificially held up. That's my point.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So how, I would say a lot of people say, well, you're saying it crashed. You're saying it's crashed. I'm doing okay. I'm paying $5 for some eggs, and I definitely we're having a pinch here and there, but we're still doing okay. I'll say, let's go for a ride. Okay, let's go through West Virginia, in the mountains of West Virginia. Let's go to East St. Louis. Let's go to the cities.
I played in basketball tournaments in East St. Louis back in the day, so I can only imagine now.
And or we could say, well, I'll even say where I was at from Ithaca, New York, which has two universities that prop it up, right? Economically, it's not a place that's doing too badly in the scheme of things. I was living on the outskirts of town. I lived out in the country, and during the whole COVID thing, I wouldn't stop in town that much anymore because it just got me so agitated. The only few times I would, I'd be like, today I want to get in that grocery store without a mask on. I really want to confront some of these crazy people. But in any case, this was just a little bit before we left, just maybe a year or so ago, and I drove through town, and I just was like, wow, this place is really going to the dogs. This is really. So I was in the grocery store. And I talked to this guy who was stocking. I said, you know what? Is it just me, or is this town really sliding pretty quickly? And he goes, you can't believe it. And then he started talking to me about what was happening, what was happening in some of the nearby homeless enclaves and happening in some of the food banks and all this sort of thing. And so, that's just an anecdote. But what I would say is that the crash is here. And we can look at it through all sorts of different indices, but if we look at it through on the ground, this is what it looks like in people's lives. And we get out, we drive around and really get on the streets. We're seeing some pretty desperate situations, and this is intentional. This is what they want. They want these situations. They want us all to be desperate and dependent, and then here's your solution.
Amen.
And that's the digital ID, the digital enslavement, which is just a complete control mechanism. And that's at least that's how I see it. I am also, despite this sort of stark landscape that I just portrayed there, which is real. That's what's out there. My wife will say, she goes, how do you remain so optimistic? And I do, I see, I keep, saying maybe I'm in denial. I keep saying,
I
well,
don't think so. I think you're pretty
yeah,
aware of what's going on.
yeah.
You don't seem like you're in denial.
That people are aware, are more aware of it also than we are propagandized into thinking, because they want to keep us atomized, but also that this isn't going to work.
No,
This system that they are going to attempt to do may incur some short-term pain, but it just will not work. It'll collapse under the weight of its own contradictions, and
completely agree.
yeah. So
I mean, and the reality is the system as it has been, and I will say was set up to be, shouldn't be anyway, and we shouldn't be a part of it anyway. And so this is a perfect opportunity, despite the pain that we are going through and that we're going to have to go through, which is just the reality of the situation. And I always like to use micro examples, looking back at all of my traumatic upbringing. And I look back on that traumatic upbringing, I'm like, damn, I'm very grateful for that, because it made me who I am now, set me on the path that I am now. I'm genuinely grateful for it. And that's kind of how I look at this situation. Are we in for a bumpy ride over the next few years? I would say, yeah, it's probably pretty likely. But the more we get close in local communities with like-minded people and support locally as much as we can, like my wife and I, we buy literally all of our meat. We choose to eat meat. We buy all of our meat from a local farm. That's every bit of meat that we buy is from a local farm, and that's what we do. That's how you support this. Just little acts like that, growing as much food as you can in your backyard. Even if you have a balcony, growing a little bit on your balcony. The more that we take steps to do that, and then as this starts to really kick up, we can start supporting each other locally. Is it going to get a little bit weird? Yeah, but I think we're going to be okay. I believe in the power of human beings. I believe in other men and women who are aware of what's going on in the world, to be resilient, to help create the solutions and counteract what's going on.
yeah, I think all of those things add up. All of the little conversations that we'll have at the checkout counter, in the park, if you're just taking a walk, or just
Yeah.
I have found I'm a pretty gregarious fellow overall, for the most part. I can strike up a conversation with just about anyone, anywhere, and have it be one that's we're talking about maybe some larger issues, but it's also it connects to your everyday life too. Yeah. And not have it be too foreboding or too all encompassing. So I've found that the people, extraordinary percentage of people, are just like, yeah, it's getting rough out there. I am aware of that. I don't now. A lot of people, and include myself in this, don't really know what to do. But you figure that out together with other people.
Amen.
And so I do think, based on that there is a time coming where people get to the point where they've had enough, and these other forces, whether they're local politicians or state politicians too, they start to read the tea leaves also. If it doesn't take that much pressure on a local politician to get them to shift their position on an issue, okay, because they've got to live with all the townspeople, right?
Amen.
And that local politician does that. He goes back to that state house, and then things start to move.
I remember you brought up the example, and I know you don't want to name where exactly, but you had an example that you've mentioned to me a number of times now, where of a local area where they tried to enact certain COVID measures, and then all the people, because it's a small town, showed up outside that guy's house, and immediately he reversed what he was trying to enact.
Yeah, and no one did anything in a threatening manner. They just pitched their tent, and they said, we're going to be living here until you get those masks off those kids, and if you don't, then you got a whole bunch of neighbors in your front yard. And that person knew the other person, and knew the other, so that happen the next day.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's the point. We can thwart these types of things at a local level. That's what I really think. I really think that we can. Yeah. And sort of disregard some of the stuff happening or the attempted measures, say referring back to COVID, and who knows what's going to come with quote climate measures here soon. And you never know. But the point is just to disregard them. Don't, like, they're not a legitimate authority. And then when it comes to local stuff, that's the stuff that you can impact if you get a gang of, not gang, but gang might be a bad word to use there, but a group of people together to say, no, we're coming together and we're not gonna allow this to happen in our communities. It's not gonna happen.
Yeah, don't ask permission.
Exactly.
Be clear. Have your plan ready, and be logical, be reasonable, be calculating, and so and you want to understand these larger issues and how they impact you. So we're talking about this very big issue, and we're talking about oil and gas contracts and this gigantic canal and some high-speed rail system that's going to be worth a few $1 trillion in the projections of some business moguls, several thousand miles away. What in the world, Well, we're already seeing people, protest locally, statewide, but against these atrocities. It's important to understand also that this is, not only will these entities who are trying to clear the field for their projects there do that wherever you're at. You just have to understand that in the background, but that is a theft from all of our communities. Where are all the resources that we need for our communities? Okay. Where are the resources to build the basic infrastructure that we want? Okay. For healthy food systems? Where is the money for the basic infrastructure that we want to have these excellent free children's health programs, children's athletic programs? And why are our property taxes going so high? Why, we could just list all these things off, right?
Absolutely.
Any number of them. Why is the cost of food skyrocketed? All these things are connected to these larger events. You don't need to go to your town hall and go through the geopolitical daisy chain there, but you want to understand that. And that, don't divorce one from the other.
Exactly.
Right. And make sure that the people that are representing you, who probably shouldn't be, we shouldn't be in that system anyway.
But yes, agree. And at the same time,
they know you understand that, and you need this over here to stop. And you need these resources that are being put into this devastating event over here, put into these positive events over here, these life affirming events over here. And that's your money anyway.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Exactly. So, Michael, thank you for this. This was an awesome contextual, historical sort of backdrop of what's going on with this whole situation, how it is all interconnected, and it ties directly to what occurs over here on our side of the pond. And for all the listeners who are in Australia and the UK and Canada, definitely the same can be said for you. It impacts you tremendously, and it's important to be aware of these things, just like Michael said, and know where the rest of the world is going crazy, what the craziness is that they're cheering for and helping to usher in, and how can we come together as men and women who are aware to help generate solutions, given that the rest of the world is going mad. So yeah, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on, Alec, and just really enjoy seeing the path that you're on and getting to know you over these last few years.
Likewise. Thanks, Michael.
See ya.